This is Bang Chan after being put under light sedation.
우리 작업해야 돼.
작업해야 돼.
좋은 노래
만들어야 돼.
He was asleep, resting, and the first thing his brain did was go to work. Ian acknowledged his own concerns, saying he doesn't believe this moment of success will last forever. That's exactly why they can't stop right now. So then, why have they always been like this? If you enjoy thoughtful videos about stray kids just like this, consider subscribing. During their Maniac tour on June 28th, Stray Kids played 25 songs across 3 hours at their first sold-out US arena. The next night, they did it again. 5 days before those shows, they walked into a studio in Hell's Kitchen for an interview with Teen Vogue. They'd already spent 4 hours filming content for other outlets. Seungmin was still recovering from a 14-hour flight, yet Crystal Bell, who was there that day, said they didn't seem fazed in the slightest. Between March and October 2022, Stray Kids released Ordinary, launched a world tour, released a Japanese EP, played arenas across the world, dropped a surprise single for Stays, previewed an entirely new album at a 2-night showcase, and released Maxident. 7 months. The same brain that was thinking of music in 2026 was doing this in 2022. To anyone on the outside looking at their schedules, it seems like they barely have any free time at all. A Grammy interviewer eventually asked them exactly that. Han, one of the members of Stray Kids' production unit, 3racha, has a song called Slump. He wrote it during one of the hardest periods of his life. He felt stuck, and the music wasn't coming to him the way it usually did. And the easy thing, or really the obvious thing, would have been to wait it out, to let whatever was eating at him pass before trying to write more music. But he didn't. What came out of it became one of the most personal songs he's ever been a part of. Han believes it's his most meaningful song because of how honest it is and how it can touch so many different people. He recognized that other people were sitting inside the same thing, and if he could turn it into something they could cherish themselves, he was going to. This belief is something Stray Kids share. Bang Chan said the most memorable thing a fan has ever told him is that Stray Kids music saved their life, and that knowing there are people out there finding courage and strength through what they make is what motivates them to do even more. But Bang Chan has also said that the higher they climb, the heavier it gets. With every move, they feel pressured that it must be better than the last one. They must exceed expectations. But that's 2025. That's after the fans, after the success, after all of it. Those interviews were filmed during the same Los Angeles stop as the SoFi shows. In the tour vlog, he was also in the green room before one of the shows, still trying to finish work. Lino walked in to complete a challenge mission as part of their Skidstalker Go series. He tried to open Bang Chan's bottle as a kind gesture, but Bang Chan waved him off. Then Lino accidentally unplugged his laptop, and to make up for it, he plugged it back in. Bang Chan barely looked up.
작업해야 돼. 오케이, 내가 튠해줄게 그럼.
안 돼.
Nobody reacted like it was a strange response, because it wasn't, and they'd written about it. In late 2025, following Stray Kids' Dominate tour, they released the special album Do It. The album features 5 songs, with 2 of them directly tying into each other. The lead title track, Do It, encapsulates the feeling of procrastination. It comes from the idea of knowing you need to be working, but you just aren't. Stopping would be foolish, just doing it is smarter. Stray Kids go on to add that actually doing whatever it is someone needs to be doing will genuinely be good for them. The group relates the song back to how they function. As Ian acknowledged, they won't have this moment of success forever. It's crucial for Stray Kids to constantly push themselves, because stopping would be foolish. However, there's another side to it. Featured on the same album is a song called Holiday. It feels like a desperate plea for rest, with lines like, "I can't remember when I had my own free time," or "just let me take a break." But the song is about something else entirely. Holiday looks at the feeling of longing for a break, when realistically, you shouldn't rest. It's a feeling Stray Kids understand better than anyone.
그래서 뭔가 그 두잇이랑 같이 붙은 것 같아. 쉬지 말라고. 쉬고 싶은 마음은 들게 하지만
그냥 해.
그냥 해라. 어쩔 건데. 해야지.
갓생이네.
Stray Kids have debuted their first 8 albums at number 1 on the Billboard 200, something no other artist has ever accomplished in the history of Billboard. However, Seungmin said their biggest goal isn't actually a chart position or a tour. It's to be a group that stands the test of time and remains in history as one of the longest lasting groups. That's what the hustling life is for. Something that lasts longer than the moment they're in. Or maybe it wasn't just about the fans. Maybe it was about the time frame they were met with, the specific moments they were inside and knew they couldn't waste. Back in 2022, during Stray Kids' Maniac tour, a Grammy magazine interviewer asked Stray Kids how they could even balance such a busy life, to which Han responded that he was very deliberate with his free time, that he tried to spend it on things that would help them grow, because right now was such an important time to step up. At the time he said that, Stray Kids had only just earned their first number 1 with Ordinary. They might have been coming off the huge success of God's Menu, Thunderous, and Maniac, but in 2022, they were nowhere near their end goal. 4 days later, Lino, Felix, and Ian tested positive for COVID. As a result, their Atlanta and Fort Worth shows were postponed the same day their conditions were announced. Something similar already happened that year. Stray Kids were getting ready to promote Ordinary, but then 6 of the members tested positive. It was just 4 days before the album released. Their radio appearances were cancelled, and the planned out fan events were pulled entirely. The first week of music show promotions, the time when they get to finally showcase the music they've been working on, were gone. However, Stray Kids were back on music show stages just 10 days later. The group didn't have time to wait out and recover. They needed to prioritize performing. Ordinary still debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200, and 6 weeks after that, the Maniac Tour opened in Seoul. Then on July 12th, Hyunjin injured his right hand before the Oakland show. Doctors advised him to avoid harsh movements for the remaining dates, but he performed that night anyway, and every night after. They didn't stop. They couldn't stop. And eventually, they lost themselves in that inability.
스트레이키즈 한과 한지성이라는 사람을 잘 이제 나눴어야 되는데 그걸 못하던 시절이 거의 그렇게 살았던 것 같아요. 그러다 보니 저도 혼동 같은 게 많이 오고.
He'd become so absorbed in working that he'd lost his own identity. One of Stray Kids' songs, Another Day, is often referred to as Han's, given his large involvement in its creation. He wrote it during the lead up to Go Live, their first full-length album. He's discussed what the song truly means as well, stating that it encapsulates the feeling of time always pressing on them while preparing music. Essentially looking back at the day you spent and feeling as though you failed to live it fully, or how you initially hoped to. The song looks at feelings of exhaustion, especially with a tiring routine, struggling to sleep, or just feelings going dull as a whole. Han goes so far as to call days like those meaningless. Stray Kids felt like any listener would be able to resonate with it very deeply, thanks to how honest Han was with it. In 2019, Stray Kids were preparing for Kali Wonmiro. On February 19th, Seungmin hurt his back. 3 weeks later, Changbin injured his ankle in choreography practice, just 12 days before promotions began. The timing literally couldn't have been worse. During the group's victory song rehearsals, the two of them sat on a couch at the side of the room and watched. They could imitate the moves from where they were sitting, get a feel for the counts and the formations, but they couldn't be out on the floor with the others. They couldn't condition their bodies to the choreography the way you actually have to, and you could see it getting to them. They were forced into a tough dilemma: either continue to practice and delay the healing, while also risking injuring yourself further, or sit off to the side and try to imitate everything while everyone continues to prepare themselves. And I think that's what's so easy to forget. To Changbin and Seungmin, sitting out wasn't relieving. It was uncomfortable. The Stray Kids are people who genuinely love being on that floor. As hard as the rehearsal, the performance, and the chaos of comeback week is, they do love what they do. And sometimes the things you love are the things that take the strongest wills. Taking that away, even briefly, even when their bodies needed it, left them with something they didn't quite know what to do with. During their training for Victory Song, Lino noticed. He suggested Changbin and Seungmin join in on a lighter moment during the rehearsal, just so they weren't stuck watching from the sideline. It's a small gesture, but Lino understood why everyone was there. And honestly, I think most people understand that feeling. Not the idol schedule, but the specific discomfort of being pulled away from the thing you've built yourself around, the project or goal that follows you into your days off, the responsibility you can't fully set down even when you're supposed to be resting, the version of yourself that only exists when you're doing the thing, and the uneasiness of who you are without it. Stray Kids live that feeling at a massive scale, but the feeling itself is anything but unique. The group's leader knows that feeling very well. Bangchan has said that even when he has time to rest, his brain won't allow it, that he's thinking about the future, thinking about what he did, thinking about the next song, the next show, the next thing that needs to be finished. Free time is always his last priority, because without the work, he doesn't know what to do with the quiet, which is exactly what makes that sedation clip so revealing. Even unconscious, his brain went straight to the music. Bangchan was just 13 when he left Australia. He packed up his life, said goodbye to his family, his friends, his dog, and flew to Korea to train. At the time, he didn't think much of it, but he certainly has since. In a 2024 Rolling Stone interview, he said he sacrificed a lot, that he thinks about it often, what life would look like if he'd stayed, the version of himself that never got on that plane. In another world, there's a Chris who never trained to be an idol, who never met the other members, who never left the simplicity of life in Australia. Maybe he's even a competitive swimmer, but he got on the plane. Even though he considers what life could have been like if he stayed, he feels grateful for his younger self's courage. That, as weird as it sounds, it was a great decision to leave his family. It's far too late for Bangchan to return to whatever life he could have lived in Australia, so he strives to give everything he's got. It's the only life he's got, after all. You only get to live one life. I know, I'm ready. Take that chance, no matter what they tell me. From 2020 to 2021, Lino and Seungmin were weekly DJs on Day 6's Kiss the Radio. Before the show, they'd go to a cafe, then take a walk with their coffee. Then they'd get dinner at a Sunday cookbok place that they kept going back to. Not necessarily because it was the world's best food, but because it was theirs. Something familiar, a comfortable routine that they could just relax in. Hyunjin's widely known for his artistic interests. Quite often he'll go to art galleries or create art himself, both of which he's shown on his Instagram page. In fact, he was painting through the night before the Teen Vogue interview in Newark. Felix plays a video game called League of Legends. He spent enough time in it that he's taught Ian how to play, patiently walking him through everything, while Ian died repeatedly and, by his own admission, said a lot of bad words. Bangchan went back to Sydney in 2022. He walked into his childhood home, saw his old room, his family, the life that existed before any of this, and he slept through an entire day. He certainly didn't plan on doing that, but being somewhere that felt that safe made it impossible not to. However, they can't always rest. Most days are well aware that Bangchan doesn't sleep much. Quite often he ends up pushing it out of the way, looking at it as a restriction for his goals, rather than a necessary time of rest. And when you consider the time frame he and Stray Kids are so concerned by, you can understand where he's coming from. Truthfully, Stray Kids are motivated by fear. Ian doesn't believe this moment will last forever, that the thought of it ending and losing the connection, stay, genuinely scares him. Hyunjin said something similar, just in his own way, that he just wants to enjoy the ride while he's here, because the good memories are what he'll remember years later, and he'll quickly forget whatever struggle was necessary. Hyunjin and Ian certainly aren't complaining. They understand nothing can truly be permanent. It's what makes Stray Kids' end goal of withstanding the test of time so interesting. If they can't give everything they've got in their first 10 years, who's to say what'll be of them in the next 10 years? Assuming the South Korean law remains the same, Lino must enlist by December 31st, 2026. All the Stray Kids members, with the exception of the Aussies, must enlist by the end of their birth year. That time frame stretches 4 years. However, it's quite unlikely for Ian to wait until 2029. It's almost guaranteed that Stray Kids and JYP Entertainment will try to keep their enlistment period as short as possible, without sending the group away all at once. It's what JYPE has done with 2PM, GOT7, and Day 6. When groups leave for their military enlistments or begin slowing down because of them, they always lose momentum. Some lose less than others, but it's an inevitable risk that comes with fulfilling military duties. In March 2026, K-pop titan BTS returned after their military hiatus. They retained quite a lot of their power, but it certainly was nothing like what they had back in 2022. I'm gonna be honest, Stray Kids aren't at BTS's level yet. As big as they are, they just aren't to that point yet. In 2025, Bang Chan said that people around them always point out how much they've grown, but he believes that they still have a long way to go. Stray Kids are aware that as soon as they're required to enlist, they're gonna start losing traction. The only thing they can do is push themselves as hard as humanly possible, honestly even further than that, and try to minimize the momentum poison that is enlistment. The group that filled SoFi Stadium, that sprinted from ordinary to Maxident in 7 months, that couldn't stop working even under sedation, that version of Stray Kids has a deadline, and it hits the end of 2026. However, Stray Kids are confirmed to still be touring by that point. There is one way they'd be able to delay it. Article 60 of South Korea's Military Service Act allows enlistment to be postponed for men recovering from injury or illness. The director of regional military office can delay a physical examination if the person isn't medically ready. And, hoo boy, do Stray Kids have a lot of injuries. In late 2025, Lino sprained his ankle at the Mnet Asian Music Awards and finished the performance anyway. Felix spent the entire North American leg of Dominate with modified choreography because his back had given out. Changbin sustained a light ankle injury just 12 days before Miro promotions began. In each of those situations, they believed there was zero negotiation for rest. Lino needed to finish the awards performance, or else there'd be an unexpected gap. Felix needed to go out each night, or else he couldn't comfort someone who desperately needed to see him that night. Changbin couldn't sit out of the promotions, or else he'd never get to experience the first day of promoting a new song he'd written. Does that mean Stray Kids will try and delay their enlistments? No, not necessarily, but it'd be the only way they can delay them, given the BTS law doesn't apply to them. It also seems to be reserved for more extreme cases, like when 2PM's Jun K fractured his elbow falling off a stage in 2017, and his enlistment was pushed back nearly a year while he recovered. On January 18th, 2017, 3RACHA uploaded 2 songs to SoundCloud, Intro and The Dreams. At the time, they were JYP trainees. They wouldn't debut for another 14 months, but at this point, they had no guarantee they'd even make it that far, so they set themselves a deadline. 1 original song and 1 cover, every 2 weeks, on top of everything trainee life already demanded of them. During this period, 3RACHA struggled to gain much attention. They'd often post their songs on a Korean hip-hop forum, but standing out and getting attention was tough. At one point, they acknowledged it, declaring to the world that even if no one cares, they'll keep going. Later that year, 3RACHA competed as part of Stray Kids on their survival show. Halfway through the series, JYP advised them to stay diligent in everything they do.
너희 스스로 정말 만족할 위치에 가기 전까지는 다른 것들을 좀 다 포기했으면 좋겠어.
That was 2017. The clip of Bang Chan under sedation released in 2026, nearly 9 years later, unconscious on a medical stretcher, and his brain went straight to work. Even after all that they've accomplished, Stray Kids aren't yet satisfied. There's still more they're eager for. JYP might have encouraged them to always stay diligent with their work, but honestly, he was just reminding them of something they already believed. Strip away everything. The deadlines, the clock, the pressure of expectations, and what you're left with is 8 people who genuinely love this. It's hard because it matters. And even though we don't always know when they're resting, they most certainly are finding their own way to. Bang Chan was 12 years old in Sydney. In those years, he'd admired performers who could do everything. He felt inspired. He wanted to be one of them. So he auditioned for a performing arts school. He didn't get in right away, so he enrolled somewhere else and waited. When a spot opened, he transferred. Then one day, he was asked to write a song as part of a homework assignment. It was harder than he expected, but somewhere in that struggle, a thought appeared. Maybe making my own music could be fun. If you want to see how Stray Kids grew their sound and changed the whole industry after pushing for years, you can click the video on the screen. And if these thoughtful breakdowns help you love Stray Kids more, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Thanks for watching! Bye 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 bye.